So here we are, as you can see, through the fil rouge of women. We actually spent a very lively and bubbly part of the morning. And now we will be hearing the words of Jenean, Merkel, Perelstein, an anthropologist, who will be telling us what it means to maybe advise companies on how to increase and enhance their environmental policy, the labor policy, to develop skills and leadership, and also achieve a very high level of positivity, which means productivity and also profitability.
Being a woman in the workplace is not easy, particularly in a male-dominated field. But oh, how far we have come. In the last several decades, women in the workplace today are celebrated by a sisterhood that sees us being respected and really taking ownership of our work in a way that we were held back from doing previously. What I'd like to share with you is ways that through our authenticity and through us stepping into our femininity and how we're meant to be as women is actually a path towards our greater success, as opposed to one that has previously held us back. I'm Jenean Merkel Perelstein, and as a business anthropologist, it's been my deep pleasure to get to witness several women in their workplaces who are both thriving and holding themselves back. Some women that I get to work with are really standing in their strength and stepping into the ownership of the leader that they're meant to be. Some women are in structures that are holding them back. And other women, I'm sad to report, are sabotaging in ways that hold themselves back. What I would like to share with you today are tips and tools of how we can work with structures to help provide environments where women thrive, where we can also challenge our own limiting beliefs and the types of things that hold us back, because ultimately we are all meant to not only thrive ourselves, but we're meant to create environments where our co-workers and our sisters thrive as well. I want you to think back now to the 1980s, at a time when women showed up perhaps to an executive workplace. And I'd like you to think about what they looked like. Now, maybe this was you, or maybe it was your mother, or maybe you only saw women like this on television. But back then, it was very common for women to show up to work emulating their brothers at work, emulating the men who created the structures that they worked within. Oftentimes, women would show up wearing ties and suits, and certainly big shoulder pads to make them look bigger and look a little bit more masculine than they really were. It was almost taboo to step into their femininity in the workplace. It was frowned upon. Now, these structures were built by men unwittingly, unknowingly, in a way that actually held women back. And I'll share that with you in just a minute. But think about these structures and this woman in that time and how she was meant to compartmentalize her life in a way that it was dangerous for her to have any kinds of emotions or any kinds of indications that she had a home life that created an emotional world for her. Because when she came to work, she was supposed to leave all that behind and be business professional only. Now, at the time, what business professional only meant was unemotional. Leave your emotions at home and only show up to work if you can focus on work only and not have emotions, as a matter of fact. at the time, the mere essence of professionalism really meant to be unemotional, almost robotic-like. Now again, these structures were built by the men who were there long before women were. And because the structures were built for the men being their absolute best, there's a lot of language surrounding competition and sports analogy. There's also competitive structures that really feed into men being the best they absolutely can be. But when women started to come into this place where men were, and they started emulating them, they began to hold themselves back simply because they wanted to become, maybe they didn't want to, but they started becoming like the men that they were working with. Now, I'd like to introduce to you a concept that exemplifies why women hold themselves back when they play this man's game. Yeah, I know many of you have been in workplaces like this where you think, it's okay, actually. I see women thrive in that environment. And that might be true for some women. But by and large, it's interesting to know that women and men each come to their work and come to their lives biochemically different. Now here, I'm not talking about gender differences. Gender is how we show up in the world and how we identify in the world. I'm talking about true sexual dimorphism, which is the indicators of what makes us physically a man or physically a woman. Now, in this dimorphism, this differences, women have a success hormone that we emit. And when we do, we are at our very best. We are our most powerful. And that hormone is oxytocin. Now, you may have heard of oxytocin as the tend and befriend hormone. This is the hormone that we have in abundance when we are snuggling our babies or when we're having a good conversation with a dear friend. In the presence of this hormone, women are at their very best. We have access to our higher functioning problem-solving skills. We are our most creative. We have access to pattern recognition that is absolutely necessary in the workplace. We are, in short, our very best selves when we have an abundance of oxytocin in our bloodstream. Now let's look at men. Men have a success hormone too. I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to you to know that for men, their success hormone, when they are at their best performance, is adrenaline. Now, adrenaline is the hormone that they secrete in order to be their most creative, their most highly functioning. And in the presence of adrenaline, they are powerful. Now, they get adrenaline by being hyper-competitive, by talking about sports, by building structures that are very hierarchical, and they know that they are going to fight to win, and they're going to claw to be their best. And they use language that helps pump them up in the best possible way for them. They'll show up to work and say, we're going to crush it today. We're going to kill it. Or any translation culturally of the same kind of thing that allows men to be at their very best. Now, we would never fault men for building structures around them being their very best. But right, wrong, or indifferent, as women tried to come into these structures and use the same language and use the same competitive nature, they too would secrete adrenaline, not oxytocin. There's an interesting problem with this biochemically as well, is that not only are women not in the presence of their success hormone, and not only are they being held back from being their absolute best, but in your body, the docking point for a molecule of oxytocin will actually be clouded, will be cluttered by the presence of a molecule of adrenaline. So in other words, when we as women have adrenaline in our bodies, we're actually being held back from having oxytocin. And so when we begin to play that man's game, when we begin to emulate the strength of men, which in and of itself is not a terrible thing, but when we do that, we prohibit ourselves from being our very best. Now, fortunately, the pendulum has swung throughout time. And these days, as women step into the workplace, we are more comfortable sharing our emotions, which, by the way, is one of the ways for us to catch up to that presence of oxytocin. And in these days, not only are women encouraged to become more holistically themselves and more authentically themselves, which means showing a whole life, that we don't just have a world of professionalism that's led by robots, but a world of professionalism that's led by human beings. Not only are women now more encouraged to become whole people in the workplace, but it's interesting to note that men too are becoming more interested in knowing that through their development of emotional intelligence, they are allowed to be more complete humans and complete leaders. And what we know today in the workplace is as we lean into our own emotional intelligence, that's when we can become more powerful and recognized as leaders. And it's through that self-awareness that women can step into a place where they bring oxytocin with them into their powerful selves. And men can step into a place where they bring with them the adrenaline that helps them with their powerful selves. And the honor that comes with helping our brothers and our sisters be their absolute best. Now, it is through this newer understanding that we know the more work we do on creating structures that allow women to be wholly and entirely themselves, the better off we are, because now we have women who are problem solving for us and using their creativity to move teams and organizations forward like never before. So my task for you, if you're a man, is to look at your structures around you. Think about the language that's used in your workplace and challenge whether or not any presence of patriarchy may be holding women back. My task and homework for you women is for you to step into your own authenticity and femininity as a woman, and knowing that through your development of your emotions and not the compartmentalization of them is where your success lies. Because when we can champion each other for who we are, we can build women up to a place where we are our very best and we have so much to offer. Our workplaces, our teams, our families, and the greater world around us. So here's to championing you as a woman to be your very best. Thank you.